Sup Shredders, my name is Logan aka Spiderhands and welcome to an SP Patrons video today that I'm making for Jacob as part of their custom monthly music review. And if we switch over to here, we have ourselves a track on the screen on YouTube. This is from an actor named Chenyu Hua, titled Dad, I'm Home. Now I'm pleased to hear that apparently this has English subs, so I'll obviously be using those. And we're going to listen through this track from start to finish, and we're going to hear what we think. Let's go. Looks very nervous. Original lyrics composer Jay Chou. Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes sense actually. I think I have reviewed this one.
我听说通常在战争后就会换来和平，但为什么我看到我的爸爸一直打我妈？就因为喝醉酒，他就能拿我妈出气。我每次真的看不下去，可是又没有办法。那时候我的年纪还太小。
I mean, like, this is an incredibly heavy way to start things, isn't it? Not that I needed to tell you that, but I think it's just such an effective way of getting to know a musician for them to just literally tell you all the stuff at the beginning. And I don't assume it would be an easy thing for them to do, you know? Especially in a
从小到大，我只有在妈妈身上才能感受到温暖。我总是在想，为什么我的爸爸会那么凶？然而我到现在都没有找到答案。如果真的我有一双翅膀可以随时出发的话，我一定会偷偷地带着我妈离开这个家。不要这样打我妈妈，我说的话你会听吗？
fantastic vibrato.
不要这样打我妈妈，难道你手不会痛吗？
I mean, like, just for this to be piano and vocals, it's just so powerful, those lyrics, you know? It's a kid begging their dad not to do that.
其实别人的家庭，别人的爸爸，种种的暴力因素，一定都会有原因的。但是呢，妈跟我都没有错，却还是离不开暴力。亏我还叫你一声爸。从小到大，你都叫我学习你，把你当榜样。好多的假象。妈妈常说，你要乖啊，要多听你爸的话。叫我怎么听你的话？
I think that, like, having this as like a dramatic reading of sorts is a really powerful way of doing it, because what Chenyu Hua has managed to do is find a niche, a way of transforming this into something completely different than it already was. I have to give respect for that. As a music reviewer, often I hear a lot of covers. People will just do the song the same way that it's already been done. But this guy he's like, no, I know I could do that. I could just talk to people and have that conversation and like do the voice of his mom and everything like that. And it would be more relatable and more intimate. And just having the strings there.
叫我怎么跟你像啊？你叫我怎么跟你像啊？你叫我怎么跟你像啊？叫我怎么跟你像啊？
I mean, he's clearly a phenomenal singer as well, you know. It's the power behind that. And to get that little vibrato at the end, that's vocal control. Even when we're going that hard, he still smashes it. Just before we get into the conclusion, you've got to understand, it's very difficult to get a crowd to not do anything and just be silent for like 10 seconds. I don't know if you guys have ever gone to a concert where the music has been heavy enough that has occurred, but I think I don't know if I prefer this to the original, but I'd say they're probably on point. And welcome to my conclusion of this, my review of this track from an act named, it's J Chow track, but it's a cover done by Chenyu Hua. Titled Dad, I'm Home. Now, I did shed a tear. I did. And I'm not saying it because I feel I need to. It's an incredibly sad performance. I don't think that you can dispute that. When I first watched this, it was so different to a lot of the stuff I've heard on shows like this. I presume that it's a talent show like The Voice or something like that, right? It's very different to what I'm used to hearing on these shows, and for several reasons. The first is that often I find that when I listen to songs on these shows, I'm not affected by it. Typically, unless they're originals. Typically, unless they're original tracks. I think that, and that is because when it's an original, you have your own blank canvas to completely spread whatever you want on it. You can say whatever you want, you can play whatever you want. And especially with artists who may not be so well known, when they go on these shows and they do originals, they have no filter. So they can basically do whatever they like. And that's why I think a lot of the people that get into later stages in these competitions that do originals, that's why it's so mind-blowing. Because not only are they able to do these covers so well, or these performances of other well-known tracks, they're also able to write their own songs. But this is a rare example where I think that this cover is just as important as the original. I'm going to try and talk about why that is without going into an excruciating amount of detail. Because if we talk about the track itself, I think that watching this performance from Chenyu Hua has made me appreciate the original more. I did not realize, even after reviewing this track and listening through it, that it was like that. It's like with the original, it was sad. Obviously, it was not pleasant, it was not comfortable, but it talked of a horrible situation, and I initially thought that that had been something that Jay had gone through. But the way that he did it, where it was sad, but it still felt relatively polished. Like, it felt as if it was a track where, even though they were going for a sort of a darker thematic angle, it was still like, okay, no, we're still in our safe space because we have a lot of the same instruments across previous albums. We're not going for anything too unpredictable or chaotic. The arrangement, the backing isn't necessarily going to get as like, it's not going to really go into a really horrific place. And by horrific, I don't mean that it will sound terrible. It's just, we played by the rules in regards to the fundamentals of music, theory and song composition within Jay Chou's originals. We've got a great sense of rhythm, interesting patterns with the percussion there. These strings and all the other instruments there with the bass lines and such like that were still catchy and they were still compelling. And with the original, I find that it was a very well done song that you could follow along to fairly easily. And it told you a story about Jay, and it was sad, but it didn't really hit you like this. This song by Chenyu Hua, just a dude with the piano and some strings, was like a sledgehammer to the heart. I don't want to sound like I'm exaggerating it, but I think you've got to understand just how difficult it can be for anyone to express their feelings and emotions. It's so difficult, I think, for a lot of people nowadays, even now with all the help people are getting to be more okay with themselves and to speak out and stuff. I cannot imagine how brave you would need to be able to do this. For Chenyu Hua to walk on stage and sing this story and make it sound even more convincing than the original is just phenomenal. I would go so far to say is that this cover is more affecting than the original. You're welcome to disagree or agree in the comments, but that's the way I personally feel about it. Chenyu Hua is an amazing singer. It's not just that the story was told where at the end, even after all of it, he still wanted to be able to call this person dad. And it seems like Chenyu Hua legitimately had some issues with their dad. And you can't really act it. I think this is genuine. I think this is him literally just... It's like a theatrical performance, but the actor doesn't need to act. Do you know what I mean? Like when he was screaming out at the end... and it was still musical, but there was just so much force behind that. The compressor on that mic channel was working its butt off. I cannot fathom what pain Chenyu Hua would have been going through to be able to belt those notes like that. Because it was like, there were two sides to it, as you can see. There was like the talking part where he spoke through the lyrics and like made it seem more like a conversation or a story that was telling like a TED talk or something like that. But the one that was actually interesting. And then in the vocal parts, he obviously tried to pay homage to the original by singing the chorus line with a similar melodic phrasing and stuff. I think he added more to it. It was a slower version than the original. He was confident and performed well. He was confident with his technique. There were no weak points, and he was able to not only sing well, but sing beyond himself. It really was a authentic, genuine performance, and I just can't fathom that it wouldn't have been anything other than his inner self coming out in that track. But moving on from that, with a vocalist who's clearly not only confident with singing and has nailed the actual cover, the rendition of the track, and sung it in a way that makes a lot of sense of what the story is about, but also spoke about it and made it has transformed it into a different version itself that arguably is bigger in scope than the original, at least. You have the actual performance itself beyond the vocals and stuff, and it's again, as I've said, it's him talking through the verses and singing through the hooks, and you didn't need to do more than that. He was iterating through the chord progressions and the triads that he had there, and then in the second verse, I think, or in the one of the initial choruses, the strings came in over top, and there was a very gradual crescendo across the track where things built and built and built and built to the point where he was belting it out at the end, and the strings and the keys were going there, and it was huge. And for TV programs, they typically add a lot of compression to it so everything's the same loudness, so it seems professional, But you notice how quiet things were at the end. It's a longer form track where, because he made it more interesting by talking about it, the listener didn't know what to expect, so they paid attention. And because it seemed like they were having a heartfelt, like it was an insight into the musician themselves. So you want to get to know the people on stage as long as they're interesting and they're not off-putting with their personality or whatever. So we had that. So we didn't even necessarily mind how long the guy was on stage because of that. So that's part of why he got away with a longer performance, despite not having a massive amount of change with the way the instruments were being played. It was an iteration, a constant repetition, a loop with various adjustments of the initial motif that's in the original, and the same key signature, but the vocals and the storytelling made it special, the style of approach. I think the motif with the strings and the piano, I'm not going to pretend it's an unconventional or uncommon thing for the piano and strings to be used in songs that have this kind of emotional attachment to them. They're very great instruments for showing a sadness, a fear, a misery, regret, all these negative emotions. But I think that it was nonetheless effective, and because we didn't continue to add to it, it just kind of stayed there and lingered, as if to suggest that this was something we were never going to resolve. And you just get the impression from that part, we wanted to call them Papa, that you just didn't know if they were going to get there or not. And it's not pleasant, it's not resolved, and it's an uncomfortable into the track, which is part of why I think the crowd was silent. It took him to get up for the people to understand that it was done. That is one of the most powerful live performances I've seen of a cover in a very, very long time. I mean, the motif sounded like the story sounded like the vocals sounded like the theme sounded, so everything was well connected, so that's another reason why it was effective. But finally, we had the studio recording, mixing and mastering, and we had live recorded strings with a guy singing his heart out on the piano, and that's all you needed. There was no quirky special effects, there were no wild random sounds. It didn't sound like it was made to elicit an effect from the audience. It just seemed like real life. And I love that. And I think that it was commercial grade with the post-production. Everything was leveled well, and got no complaints about that. I just think it goes beyond that because of how much the singer was able to express themselves without any filters. And it's very impressive. And to be honest with you, I think that they'd be able to handle any song, make it into their own, and they get an audience for that. And I really hope they do, because they did a great job with this. And it is a privilege I suppose on a final note, it's a privilege for us as listeners to be able to listen to a track, have someone sing their heart out, and us be able to go, hey, we had that, but we also enjoyed it. Because you can't guarantee that when people are this honest about stuff, it's going to be something you necessarily benefit from. So I think we should be grateful that we got the opportunity to listen through this and hear it. And I'm grateful I got the chance to review it. So thank you very much for watching this review of this track. My review of this track. It's a cover of the Jay Chou track, Dad I'm Home by Chenyu Hua. Hopefully enjoyed it. If you did, please go check out their various social medias and YouTube page. Stay cool and stay safe, and please remember to support your local musicians and artists at this point in time, as they either help more than ever with the crazy stuff going on in the world, and I'll catch you in the next SP Patrons video. Spiderhands out.